Ladies and gentlemen, we ask that you please take your seats. We're going to begin momentarily. We ask that you please take your seats at this time. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Our next panel explores how the Iranian Jewish community can develop a voice in American political affairs. We could not have selected a better person to give introductory and keynote remarks to begin this topic than the man who has represented many of our families over the last 34 years in the United States Congress. Congressman Henry A. Waxman has been a Congressman Henry Waxman has been a true friend to the Iranian Jewish community over the last 30 years and has been a reliable advocate for strengthening the U.S.-Israel alliance. On a personal note, one of my formative life experiences was a summer internship in Congressman Waxman's district office when I was in college. I had the privilege of watching him work, helping him serve his local constituents, and joining him at the Democratic Convention in Los Angeles. To the high school and college students in the room, I cannot stress enough the value and the meaning of serving your community and your government by working in a congressional office. And I urge you in the strongest terms to explore such an opportunity while you're still young and you have the time to do so, and you have one of the leading members of Congress, one of the leading public servants in the United States right here today and representing us. So we urge you to take advantage of that opportunity. Please join me in welcoming Congressman Henry Waxman.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction, and I'm delighted to be with all of you on this very successful conference. And I want to thank Sam Yerby. I'm a little biased about the work that he's done because he served in my office, and I've known him since he was a student in school, and I'm pleased to see that he's continued his interest in public affairs. All of you here are commemorating 30 years after the Iranian Revolution, and which brought so many of you and your families to the United States. You are meeting, ironically enough, in the 30th Congressional District, no relationship between the 30s. And in this congressional district, which I'm honored to represent in Washington, we have the largest Iranian community in the country. And I'm very proud of this group. It's taken its place as an immigrant group, and as other groups have done in the United States, and as other Jewish groups have done in the United States. For those of you who fled the revolution of Khomeini, I know it has been years of adjusting, but you and others who have come after you, and even some before, brought with a sense of culture and history and Jewish commitment, an entrepreneurial spirit. You are one of the outstanding groups of immigrants to ever come to the United States. I'm pleased that this conference is going to look at the issue of being involved in U.S. political affairs. I think it's important because in this country, we're proud of the fact that everyone makes a difference. Every vote counts. And to participate in that electoral and political process is something that is available to all of us. When I first ran for office for Congress 34 years ago, I was the first Jew ever elected in Southern California, even though we had the second largest Jewish community in the country. It isn't because Jews weren't involved in politics or interested in public affairs. It was because Jews didn't feel that they should be in the public eye, that they should be in public office. They felt they should be behind the scenes. And I was a little concerned about it. When I first ran, would people vote for me or against me because I was Jewish? And I realized that there are only two groups that notice whether you're Jewish: the anti-Semites and the Jews. And luckily, there were many more Jews in this area. But in the years that I've been in Congress, and I'm now the dean of the Jewish members of the House of Representatives, where we have 26 Jewish members, some from areas with large Jewish population, and many from areas where they may well be from the only Jewish family in the community. These Jewish members were as involved and participated as actively as all other members of Congress, and it didn't make any difference to their communities whether they were Jewish or not. But all of us share a heritage, a faith, and a commitment to the United States and its closest ally, the State of Israel. As you examine getting involved in politics, I'm pleased that many have already been involved in community activities like AIPAC or other Jewish community organizations or the Iranian Jewish Federation. Groups make a difference, and individuals make a difference. We're looking at a presidential election this year, which I think is going to be historic. And it could be decided by a very narrow margin. In 2000, the election was decided by 500 votes. In 2004, it was decided by thousands of votes in a country with millions of people. We don't know what the outcome will be. But it's important to be involved because we care. We care about what we can do in the community in which we live, and the expression of what we do as a community is often through our collective involvement in government itself, whether it's a local government, the state government, or the federal government. Jews have always cared. It's part of our whole ethic, and it's our ethic to try to make this a better world. So I want to encourage all of you to be involved. You can be Democrat, you can be Republican. I prefer you be Democrat, but you can be either one. You can be independent. You can explore where things are going. But in this country, at our national level, there is something important that you have to offer that's unique. As the United States faces the foreign policy problem, which is, I think, number one, of an Iran with nuclear weapons, and as we confront Iran, those of you who speak the language, understand the traditions, understand the people, have a lot to say from which your governmental representatives can benefit. Simply branding Iran as a member of the axis of evil is not a policy. It's a name-calling. And it made me a little uneasy because name-calling doesn't lead to solutions. We need, whoever the next president is going to be, to have the best judgment to confront this very, very threatening dilemma for our nation and for the whole world. And for those of us who care so much about the Jewish community here, the relationship with Israel, the concerns of Jews all around the world, we have to be involved, as we always have been, for Jews everywhere. It is an important part of our obligation. In a few weeks, literally, we'll be celebrating Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. At Yom Kippur, we'll be reading from a Haftorah that will say, what is it that God wants of us? Is it a fast to punish ourselves? Is it the punishment of that day? And the Haftorah goes on to say, no, it's the commitment to be involved in trying to feed the hungry and to clothe the naked and to be concerned about widows and orphans. We can do that through community organizations, through local government, through the national government. And I'm so pleased that this organization, as you look at the community here 30 years after a revolution that forced so many of you to leave and your family members to leave, can bring together something that we all need, and that is the involvement of all of you. I think you have an excellent panel that's going to speak to these issues. I am pleased with the fact that you're going to hear from some people who are so knowledgeable. And I wish you all the very best at this conference. It's a great conference. It's a successful conference. By seeing all of you, I know how successful it has been to now, and I know, as I looked at the agenda, it's an important conference for all of us. I want to wish you all the very best for this conference, and for Lashona Tova Tikatevu, may we go on from strength to strength. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Congressman. My name is Jasmine Oberman. Good afternoon. After 30 years in the United States, most members of our community refer to themselves as Iranian American Jews, given that they are now American citizens or were even born here. However, our community is still working to acculturate itself into the larger Jewish community and American politics and civic activities. Today, we have a distinguished panel here to discuss the issues that our community faces in this process. Please join me in welcoming our moderator, Dr. Morgan Hakimi, President of Nesa Israel Synagogue. Our first panelist, Jimmy Delshad, who is shortly arriving. He is a city council member and former mayor for the city of Beverly Hills. Councilman Delshad was the first Iranian Jew elected to public office in the United States, and prior to his election to office, Councilman Delshad served as president of Sinai Temple and Magbet Foundation. Our second panelist, David Javdan, is managing director at the firm of Alvarez and Marshall. Mr. Javdan served as general counsel of the Small Business Administration under George W. Bush. And Mr. Javdan was also the coordinator for the Bush for President 2004 Jewish Outreach Program. Our third panelist is Mrs. Gina Nahai, a professor of creative writing at USC and the best-selling author of several novels. Mrs. Nahai has advised the Department of Defense regarding Iranian politics and is a frequent lecturer on Middle East politics, appearing regularly in the Jewish Journal and the Huffington Post. Our last panelist is Makan Delrahim. He is a shareholder at the firm of Brownstein, Hyatt, Farber, and Schreck. Mr. Delrahim served as Deputy Assistant Attorney General for the Justice Department Antitrust Division under George W. Bush. Mr. Delrahim has also served on the U.S. Antitrust Modernization Commission and as Chief Counsel of the Senate Judiciary Committee. But before we get to our panel, we would like to introduce an academic in the field of Iranian Jewish studies to give us some background on the evolution of the Iranian American Jewish community. Dr. Nahid Pirnazar earned her PhD in Iranian Studies from UCLA, where she teaches Iranian classical literature, history of Iranian Jews, and Judeo-Persian literature. She is the founder and president of the House of Judeo-Persian Manuscripts and serves on the boards of Iranian Jewish Women's Organization, the Habib Levy Cultural and Educational Foundation, and the Iranian American Heritage Foundation of Southern California. From personal experience as her daughter, I can tell you that Dr. Pirnazar is also a dedicated and loving mom. The only devotion she has equal to her love of family is her passion for Iranian Jewish history, whether it is her own personal pursuit for knowledge or the education of younger generations about our rich cultural heritage. Please join me in welcoming Professor Nahai Pirnazar. Thank you.
So wonderful to see our next generation doing so well. Dear founders and board members of the 30 years after, distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen, let me first express how honored and privileged I am to be given an opportunity to have a small share by giving an introductory remark at this historic moment of our Iranian Jewish history. On the 30th anniversary of the Islamic Revolution in Iran, we can appreciate the impact this historical event has had on the destinies of Iranian people, regardless of their background or ethnicity. As one of the oldest Jewish communities of the world, dating back 2,700 years ago, Iranian Jews have always demonstrated their allegiance and loyalty to Iran. However, the revolution caused the mass migration of many Iranians, including Jews. This migration has resulted in the establishment of many Iranian communities abroad, and with the exception of those in Israel, the community in Los Angeles has become the largest Iranian Jewish community outside of Iran. Between the 1940s and 1978, the Iranian Jewish population in Los Angeles was not as diverse as what we have today. The community was primarily comprised of immigrants from higher or upper middle socioeconomic classes, or students who had temporarily relocated to attend university. Even before the revolution, Iranian immigrants to the United States were already distinguishing themselves as one of the most successful immigrant communities. Following the revolution, American Jewish agencies such as HIAS and the American Jewish Federation helped make it possible for more Iranian Jews to immigrate, regardless of their socioeconomic, professional, or religious background. The trauma of forced immigration and resentment was not easy, and the gratitude we feel as a community cannot be fully expressed to the various institutions, community members, synagogues, and rabbis who helped with legal, medical, educational, and social services, not to mention embracing a relatively unknown Mizrahi tradition to their congregations and communities. Now, 3 decades later, we can appreciate how far our community has come in living the American dream. With new opportunities and advantages available to us, which we had never experienced before. We see ourselves and our following generations an active and vibrant part of the American community, and we, in turn, can be both benefactors and active members of those organizations which helped us as when we were struggling. At present, not only has our community become involved in those organizations which provided us direct service, but we have been able to contribute in the areas of academia, the arts, music, sports, and entertainment. Perhaps the greatest example of our integration into our new homeland is our activism in its political process, an opportunity which was not available to us in Iran. While we see members of our community being appointed or elected at local government levels, we also see how diverse our political leanings have developed. As Iranian Jews living in the United States, we have not only the opportunity to vote for what affects us directly, but to pick and elect officials who will support our attachment to Israel and show concern to the neglected freedom and human rights of Iranian citizens. As we diversify in our social and political views, our cultural ties remain strong. While our community may be divided into democratic and Republican values, we are a united voice against the present Islamic regime in Iran. Fortunately, the appreciation of a multicultural society in this country allows people of different backgrounds to integrate into American life while they still maintain their respective individuality and ideologies. Our gathering today, I am so proud to see organized and initiated by our younger generation, is a manifestation of such American values blended with our unique Judeo-Iranian heritage. Once again, thank you, board members, for creating today. You are our future. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jennifer Naravshan. I'm a board member of 30 Years After. Today, we are honored to have with us Dr. Mojgan Hakimi, president of Nesak Synagogue, one of the largest Iranian synagogues in the United States. Dr. Hakimi is the first female president of any major Iranian Jewish organization in the country. She has taught organizational psychology in California State University and has authored several publications on leadership and cross-cultural studies, which have been translated in multiple languages. From 1999 to 2003, Dr. Hakimi led a group of mental health professionals to Israel. On their visit, they provided support to their counterparts and to Israeli citizens impacted by the hardships of war. In 2000, she led a suicide prevention program that was adopted by the leadership of the 38th Congressional District of California. On a personal note, Dr. Hakimi has been one of the most supportive community leaders in our organization. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Mojgan Hakimi.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. There has been so many distinguished speakers that I would really like to move to start the panel. However, I've been asked to give an introductory remark. I'll make it short in 2 minutes. There's a very interesting Persian expression that says, if you go to a mullah, he will write you, when you have a problem, if you go to a mullah, they will pray for you. If you go to a doctor, they will write you a prescription. When this group started, in terms of how the community leaders, civic leaders, and politicians in our community and the American community looked at it, was beginning of the Iranian Jewish population taking charge and announcing their ownership of part of the American Jewish community. In the eyes of our Rabbanut, it was a civic duty mandated by God. In the eyes of our psychologists, it was an entirely different matter, coming from a collective community that we follow each other, train of thought, We vote as our neighbors. This is the beginning of an individualization of thought. This is the beginning of standing by our convictions and accepting that our thoughts and point of views might be different than our neighbors, but yet tolerating each other and beginning to step into democracy. So for many of us, today is the inception of an individualization of our thoughts, and watching a community after 2,700 years of living in a collective manner to begin to take a step forward outside of their own inner circle. And for that, historic moment, we only owe it, as you observe around yourself, you only owe it to our kids, which means that with our way of thinking, we couldn't do it. It had to be the generation after us that lived in pure democracy, that would take the opportunity and would risk to gain personal freedom. Allow me to start the panel. At the beginning, I would ask each member of the panel to give us a few minutes introductory, and then we'll move into questions and answers. I do ask you if there are any questions to write it and give it to the active members of 30 Years After. They will give it to me, and I will ask our panelists. If you would like it to be specifically answered by one panelist only, please let me know. Furthermore, do forgive my back, because I would like to engage my panelists, so I would probably have my back to part of the audience. So beforehand, I ask your forgiveness. My only attempt would be to engage them to a better conversation. We will begin. I am technologically challenged, forgive me. Jimmy, would you start, please?
Number 7. I'll use mic number 5.
Thank you, Jimmy.
So don't shut it off. Thank you very much. And I'm so pleased to be here. If I was late, I have to apologize, because I was coming from another speaking engagement at Rodeo Collection, where the women, Ne'emat, were honoring the Mrs. Mahboubi and many others. Today for me is really like a delicacy. For me is like having dessert after having a great meal. When I became the mayor, it was really astonishing to me. Sometimes walking around, I pinch myself that I'm really the mayor of this city, and a Persian Jew. But today, when I see the young generation taking after that and making sure that momentum is not dying and it will continue, that's really very, very sweet and heartwarming for me. When I came to this country, I knew I had a lot of accomplishment, but my desires were to make something important, some kind of a important effect on the American community, that they said Persian Jews and Persians are good people. So my idea was to become somebody, but I knew I had to have 2 real ingredients. And that's why I want to convey to you, the youngsters. I learned that from my mother, I learned that from my wife, the 2 women in my life that taught me passion alone is not enough. I have passion, but beside passion, you have to have something else with it. When 8 years ago I became president of Sinai Temple, they told me it's impossible. It took me 12 years before that, but I learned passion alone wasn't enough. Persistence is what makes it happen. So when you fall, you get up and you do it again. You take anything that comes in front of you and you jump over it. It's not an obstacle, it's an opportunity. The same thing happened to me when I wanted to become mayor, or if the first time on council. Everybody was telling me, Jimmy, why do you want to do that? I said, well, I can do something good. How do you know you're going to win? I said, well, I'm very handsome. Maybe people would vote for me. They said, but Jimmy, you have an accent. I said, believe me, until I came to this country, I didn't have an accent. So I'm going to use the accent as an opportunity, not as an obstacle. So everywhere I went, I started up like this. That broke the group, and they started listening to me. Then I knew I could not get to the Persian families that have never voted before, or not even in Iran, that have come here to vote for me. I turned that obstacle into an opportunity. I went through their kids. I went to every school, to the high school, to elementary schools. I went to every kid. I said, go tell your parents, there is a Persian guy running for the council. Why aren't you voting for him? I gave him a pen to take home that says, elect Jimmy Delshad. They are the one that brought the parents back. They are the one that made me. And the young people are the one that put me over to be able to make it. So my short remarks, have passion, have persistence, and you will overcome every obstacle in your life. It only happens in America. It can also happen in Israel. As you know, Israel is looking for a prime minister, so maybe after I finish here, I'll go around there. Thank you.
Mr. Makan, please, Mr. Delrahim, go ahead.
Thanks. I think that passion is important. I'm proud to be here, to be part of this community. I've been in Washington for 16, 17 years and really haven't been part of the Iranian or the Iranian Jewish community. And so I'm just so proud that folks are getting, I think it's a big, I want to commend the organizers of this organization and this event today to try to get folks a little bit more involved. I'd spent a number of years in Washington in all three branches of the federal government, and I think what Mr. Delshad said is exactly right. You have to have passion to get involved. One of the most important things in this country is the vote. At the federal level, people think money is the most important thing to run for political office. Money is important, but only money is used in order to get people registered, to get them out to vote. People think positive press is important. It's one of the most important things. Whether you want to change the law or you want to get elected or however you want to influence the political process, which is done every day here. The press is incredibly important, but again, it's important to get people to come out and vote. And as a result of that, and the voter registration and all that, it all really comes down to folks exercising their constitutional right to do so. It is one of the most important ways to affect the process, to vote, to organize, to register, to get out. If folks in this community had not done that, Mr. Delshad wouldn't have been the first Iranian American to be elected to public office. And that's, I think, a point of pride for people not necessarily just related to him, but I think within this community, to see the first person kind of break out and do that. And I think we need to do more of that. Unfortunately, I think for congressional offices, a lot of times districts are rigged. I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but you have districts. Districts are redrawn, and every 10 years, Republicans and Democrats will sit together in this state, in Sacramento, and they will decide how many people they want to have in their district. Democrats will pick 60-70% voter history of voting and voter registration. Republicans will do the same thing, and each of them live in perfectly happy little districts whose primary is really the only election they have. And so you got to pick your party before you're going to get active in that particular community. So if you don't have a choice of moving from, let's say, Beverly Hills to Simi Valley, if you're going to get active in political office, at the federal level here, you're going to be a Democrat. Otherwise, you don't have a chance. And that's just part of the system that, you know, you kind of realize being inside the belly of the beast. But that's an important thing. But, however, if you register, if folks will have a voice, if they band together and have, you know, if there's a particular issue, you go into the member of Congress, the senator's office, and you say, we represent a 10,000 vote block, and we could swing that district, that election, unless you listen to us. It's got to be a legitimate issue, of course, but that's the one thing. The one thing I've always tried to realize and find is, you know, within this community, Israel is obviously a very important issue, some of the relations with Iran, but there aren't things that other immigrant communities or other ethnic groups really have that unites. You know, you have African American community, you've had issues of civil rights that have always been an important issue. I don't know if this community really has a lot of those issues that are specific, other than two issues of Israel and Iran to some extent, some immigration policies perhaps. But outside of that, I think we need to dig in and see what is it that binds us culturally, binds us from a policy standpoint, and begin working and getting involved at the local level and at the federal level on those issues. Thanks.
Hi.
Gina, go ahead, please.
Okay. I think before you decide how to become politically involved, it's perhaps good to wonder, why are you becoming politically involved? I think, you know, there is a political involvement that serves the rather narrow self-interest. My taxes, my causes, Israel being one of them, perhaps Iran being one of them. But what do I care about on a personal level? What affects me directly, you know, and so on. And then there is political involvement out of a sense of serving the greater good, seeing what's wrong in the world and really wanting to change that, not because you're an Iranian, not because you're a Jew, not because you're an immigrant, but you see a wrong and you want to help set it right. And the big question is, which one is more important to you? Now, I want to do something that perhaps I shouldn't be doing as part of the older generation, which is, instead of telling you what to do, I'm going to tell you what not to do. Don't do what we did. Don't do what people of our generation did. I think what happened with Jews in Iran and later with our community here is that we transferred a lot of the values when we came out of here that don't necessarily translate well in this country, that if applied in this context don't necessarily help advance our causes. We lived in a very intolerant community, and it's taken a long time, as in community in Iran, Islam was intolerant, and the Jewish community also was rather intolerant. And it's taken us a long time to wake up to the fact that tolerance is an important issue. We also lived as a minority group, both in Iran and in the United States. Mostly what we cared about was what affects our community directly, either Jews or Jews in Israel. What did we want for those causes? And that's not necessarily the case here. And finally, because we're a traditional society, we have hesitated often to question the conventional wisdom. And that, too, I think, is something that might serve us well to begin to ask, are all of the assumptions that we have had over the years, that our parents have had, are they all correct? Do you guys want to grow up and become your parents? Just something to think about. Thank you.
Well, I'm truly honored to be here. I flew in from Washington this morning, landing about 10:30 this morning, and I'm taking off about 10 o'clock tonight. And I don't tell you that to have a built-in excuse in case I say anything wrong here or do poorly, but to highlight just how important I think political involvement is, and to not overstate the case. I literally believe that political involvement is a matter of life or death. And if you don't believe me, or if that sounds overstated, I'd like to point you to two dates, 1939 and 1979. Now, I had the chance to learn a lot and to study 1939. In 1999, I had the rare honor and great privilege of being thrown out of the Austrian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Apparently, they didn't like my suing them on behalf of Holocaust survivors to reclaim assets that were stolen from the Jewish community. And they tried to tell us that we had a moral claim, not a legal claim, but fortunately 9 justices of the United States Supreme Court ended up voting our way. And you know you're doing pretty well when Justice Scalia, those of you who are lawyers, ends up writing your majority opinion in a human rights case. So we were able to make a real difference. Now, during that time, I began to see what had happened in 1939. In 1939, in the United States, we had a very wealthy Jewish community here, but it didn't have a voice. In 1979, our community, particularly the Persian community, was not necessarily as wealthy or as powerful, but it had a voice. And people can really make a difference. And I'll just use, if you'll indulge me 1 minute, the example of my parents, who were actually younger than I am now, and not much older than many of the people who are putting this together. In 1979, when they were here in the United States, 1978, they had no power. They couldn't vote. They couldn't give money because they weren't yet United States citizens, but they lived here. And they went to their local congressman, who happened to be a Jewish guy, who was the co-head of the Committee on Soviet Jewry. And this was Congressman Benjamin Gilman. And they went to him and they said, hey, look, we understand what's going on in the Soviet Union, and you need to continue that work. And we understand that you're focused on World War II, but people are being killed for their beliefs today, and something needs to be done. And at first he was a little bit tough because he wanted to know what was really going on. But he was convinced, and he understood. And he stood up and he used that post in a bipartisan way to help get temporary protected status, a status that had never existed before for people in our community, and to help people come to the United States. And if I can say some people in their late 20s and early 30s, and there are obviously others involved, could have that much of an impact. You never know when you're going to need that voice, that ability. But the fact that you have it and that it's there is critical and can make all the difference in the world. So God bless all of you for putting this together, and to the board members of 30 years after for making sure that this will not be another problem in 40 years.
Thank you, David. This panel is unique in the sense that all our pioneers, Jimmy was the first Iranian Jew to hold the position he did. David and Makan both were extremely young for the positions they held in Washington and with President Bush. And Gina has been the first female writer and very outspoken in many issues that has made other people uncomfortable in our community, but she has always stood very strong, and for that, I and many other women have adored her and read her books.
I love you
bought
too.
her books. Now, the reason I did the personal remark about each and every panelist is that my aim would be to ask them questions that would relate to their ways of thinking, and how did they embark on this journey, and why? Why did they think that? Actually, this relates to one of the questions that was asked from the audience. That why did you each think that becoming active in community services, civic services, politics, will benefit you or your own community? We had to have a voice, but they want to know a little bit more in depth. Why, and Jimmy, can you start first to say, why did you go over all the obstacles, which many of them, you know, I was present to, even during what happened
Yes.
in Sinai Temple. So why? Why the spark?
First of all, getting involved in Sinai Temple for me was to set a precedent that we are not only here as guests, we are here to stay. And when we are here to stay, we want to contribute. For many years, they thought all of us are here for 4 or 5 years, we're going to go, and we kind of did the same thing. We didn't become active. We thought Iran will get better and we'll go. I wanted to set a precedent that we are here to stay. The next thing that got me involved was, if you remember, 5, 6 years ago, all the Iranians were asked to go to immigration and report their status. And when they reported their status, whether they were legal or illegal, or they were late or not late, they were arrested. Many of them were in jail for 2 weeks at a time, and there was no one that could call any congressman and say, why? I said, you know what the problem is? Is because we have two powers. Iranians have power of money. We have very good businessmen, right? And we also have education, most wonderful educators and education. But what we don't have is power of politics. If you don't have the power of politics, you cannot control, affect the laws, or affect your congressman. That day I decided I want to get involved in politics, so if something like that happens, I want to be able to be a voice, and now I can call any congressman and any senator. They'll take my call, whereas before they would not. That's why I got involved.
Do you mind? Thank you.
I got involved by pure accident. I left the LA area and went to Washington, D.C. to go to law school, and I was working, and I thought I'd be, a biotechnology patent lawyer, come back to somewhere between San Diego and Santa Barbara, where I'd grown up, and live happily ever after. And being in Washington, which is one of the things that I've encouraged each of my cousins and siblings and now my nephew, who are all moving to do a little stint there. And I think for anybody who is either in college or immediately after college or in graduate school, one of the best things you can do, whether it's locally because you can't do it working for a Congressman Waxman or Feinstein or anybody who's in your district, or going to Washington. And it really doesn't matter. You don't have to be a lawyer. You don't have to want to be a lawyer or have studied political science. In fact, it's better if you didn't, because you add value no matter what you're doing. If you are a physician, it's a wonderful thing. I used to hire, usually every year we had a physician fellow on the Senate Judiciary staff, because we would get involved with all sorts of healthcare legislation, and their expertise was that much more important, and I would look to that for their backgrounds to get one. But it is, no matter what it is that you're doing, either an accountant, it's an important way to get involved. So I was over there and was thrown into a policy debate in 1994 dealing with international trade laws and how federal funding for biotechnology research would affect U.S. relations with respect to European funding for companies like Airbus. And that was my very first taste, which went because I had some background in that field. And all of a sudden, it's a very seductive process. And so I had no intention of getting into politics, but once you're in, I think Mr. Delshad would probably agree, you get to realize the power you can have of affecting various issues. You don't like a particular law, you change it here. You don't have to litigate it. You don't have to go to, if you think it's unfair and you think most of the public will believe that, there is a process of going there and arguing for the changes of that. So, and then one thing led to another, and I got involved with the terrorism and judicial confirmations and whatever it came about after that. But that's how it started about, 10, 12 years ago. But it was one of the best experiences. So I had no real agenda, no real background. I ended up working for a Mormon from Utah, never had contributed politically. I started out as a Democrat. I was a Gary Hart Democrat who ended up working for Orrin Hatch, John Ashcroft, and work with that kind of group now, partly because I probably agree philosophically with a lot of the positions that they take, but not necessarily all the time. So I would encourage anybody to go in there and change in their area of expertise how you want to do it.
I'm not involved in politics. They wouldn't let me into politics if I tried. I'm too politically incorrect most of the time. But I started writing because I really, I saw a story that hadn't been told and that I thought needed to be told, and that was the story of Iranian Jews in Iran, and that's why I started writing my first novel. But along the way, to tell the history of a people as you see it, you discover a lot of things, a lot of truths that either have been denied or suppressed over the years. And it was important to tell those truths as I saw them. And I think what Morgan's alluding to as saying things that are sometimes popular and sometimes not, it was that's what I see my responsibility, my job is to see what I think is the truth about our community, about our world, and to tell it in the best way that I can.
Well, I'd like to start with politically incorrect or not. If you want to come into politics, we'd be happy to have a conversation
Not
with you
with the
afterwards.
Bush people, no.
We're happy to take you with any people. We're happy to take you with any people. And, everyone can talk about the obstacles. I'd actually like to focus on the other half of that because I think one of the biggest issues facing our community, it's not the obstacles, it's that we have an incredible inheritance. We have places at the table. I served on the board of, I served on AIPAC's executive committee. I served on the board of the RJC. I served in a lot of major, powerful American Jewish organizations, and they weren't trying to keep me out. They're begging to have Persians in. We have a large constituency, we have bright people, we have active people, and they'd like to have us in. The door's open, all we have to do is walk through. And so what I'd really do is encourage all of you, and it doesn't have to be politics or running for office or anything like that. I mean, I started because I was the general counsel of 4 not-for-profits pro bono, right? I would encourage each and every one of you, if you see something out there that you like, reach out to other people who are around. The doors are open. It's very easy to get in. Elected office is something else different. God bless you. I'd never do that. But I'd really say the only obstacle that a lot of us face is just we don't think it's there for us.
Other minority communities in the United States have succeeded in the civic and political life. Is there any lesson in what they have done that you think our community can adapt and basically learn from? Would you say specifically any community that they have done anything that have come further than we have? And what would be the pattern that they've used, and if that can help us in any way? Jimmy, if you...
I think one example would be the Latino community. I have been involved with them and I have seen them being so active. And our mayor, Villaraigosa, is of course an example of that, reached that point. And look, even the Armenian community got together and elected a governor of California, many years ago, Duke Majan. So there are communities that can do it if they are together. If you are scattered and we put everything else first and second, and politics or involvement in community, I'm not saying politics, but I'm talking about even politics of organization. If you are involved in a temple or a non-profit organization, each one of them have their own politics. When you get in those organizations, try to elevate yourself. Try to move up to the higher level of boards of directors. I think we can learn that from other communities. You can see the Cuban communities are very, very active, other places, the Latinos, and I think we have to learn from them. In fact, I think we're going to learn and teach the Israeli community that's not as active as we are. Believe it or not, we are a great teacher for other communities. You're just getting started, and we go a long way if you keep up this one. So I encourage you to stay on it and continue with that.
I have another question which is specific, and I would like to ask David and Makan to respond to it. The question is, how can we get Iranians more involved to protect and be vocal in Iranian affairs and foreign policy? How can we get our own community more involved to be out there and to do what's necessary to do when it comes to United States foreign policy?
I think it depends on the issues. Again, what is it that that is important to this community? I think that's one of the most important things, and so it's finding the reason you'd want to get involved, other than being recognized or getting some public acknowledgement for it. But finding that is the most important thing, and either doing it through other organizations that fight for those issues. For example, it could be something to deal with, I don't know, immigration, or it could be Israel, and then you attach on with AIPAC. But the most important thing is coalescing together and getting active on those within those organizations. So like David was saying, getting involved within AIPAC and being active in their policy issues. For the Iranian American community and how it relates to other ethnic groups, I think Hispanic community and others are well represented in Congress and in other elected office. I think that's just a lot of it's just sheer numbers. Los Angeles, the community that would elect Mayor Villaraigosa is going to have a lot of Hispanics, and they would identify and be able to vote for that. We were beneficiaries of that, I think, to some extent. In Beverly Hills, there's a lot of folks. So I think as far as the representation, get out, vote, as the folks in Chicago would say, vote often, and have a lot of children who would vote in that community. That's one way to really do the sheer numbers. Outside of that, there's a limited number of folks that we have, but that doesn't mean that the influence of this community has to be limited.
I would add to that, I mean, half of the part of success is just showing up, and I'll use a concrete example. About 5 years ago or so, there was a program with the U.S. government where people could leave Iran, go to Austria, and then from Austria come into the United States, and a lot of the Jewish community came through there. There were huge problems with that program. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, people couldn't get into the United States anymore. Now, and I'll say this. I'm not particularly powerful. I had no ability to influence anyone's position or change them, but no one knew that this was happening, right? Our community knew it was happening. So I'd heard from Shahar Azani, who's the president of the Iranian American Jewish Federation in New York. I used to be their general counsel. I heard from Rabbi Shofet. I heard from Sam Kermanian. And they called me and they said, what do we do? And I was like, honest, I don't think anyone in the White House knows that this is happening. So we set up a meeting for him in the White House with the Jewish liaison, who also is not a pretty high-level person, and they got the problem fixed very fast. And that wasn't... And that's got nothing to do with Democrat or Republican or with power. You see, our community usually tries to think, okay, who's really in charge? And the reality in politics is usually no one's in charge. It's chaos. Things are running around. So if you can bring things to people's attention. So the important thing is to be focused. You can't go to the well 100 times, but to know what your issues are and to make sure that you've got people on both sides. The very important thing about AIPAC is that they were very careful to have people on both sides and just go to that person to open the door. And usually, no matter who's there, they're willing to listen.
Good point.
David, I think you mentioned something that is very important, and probably that's what I meant when I said the seed is being planted today. It's a different way of thinking about politics and ruling of a country, a different way, and this takes a lot more time than 1 or 2 conferences. But I'm very glad that you alluded to that point, that we could get involved no matter how powerful or powerless we think we are. There are some specific questions that are addressed, one for Gina and the other one for Makan. If you're comfortable to answer that, let me know. If not, we can move on. Gina, this question is for you, and they wanted to know, in your opinion, which values are important for us to keep as we've migrated from Iran to United States? Are there any values in our traditions that for you those are important to keep as Iranian Jews?
Who asked that question? Here's the trouble. What's important to me is not necessarily important at all. So I hesitate to sort of preach anything but tolerance and questioning the status quo and the establishment. That said, I think that Iranians altogether, Iranian culture has certain inherent strengths that really are unique in this world. We are a culture, we're very loyal people, very resilient people, very very flexible in many, many situations. And we believe in family and friendship and togetherness, both as Jews and as Iranians. I mean, the original Iran, it was a very tolerant place to begin with, before Islam arrived. And it was also a place of many, many different tribes living together in relative peace and harmony. And within that, I think we all managed, the entire Iranian nation managed to stay together in spite of everything that history has thrown to us. And that comes out of it, the inherent strength that we've had, the sense of one community or one group helping the other, the sense of an awareness of history. Here's something that's really important. We knew what the past had brought, and that really enriches a person's life experience. So all that's really, really good. Now, there are also other stuff that are worth looking at once more.
Thank you. Megan, this question is specifically for you. Could you please tell us your role and Senator Hatch's role in helping the Iranian rabbis that were imprisoned in Iran? Would you like to talk about that?
Sure. When the 13 Jews were taken in Shiraz, which is my parents are from Shiraz originally. 2 of them were related to us, and I think almost every Iranian Jew is interrelated somehow, but particularly in a particular city, and Shiraz was. So I'd learned about this, and I saw it in some of the press, and I was at the time working for Senator Hatch, who's been a great friend of Israel. And with Jewish people. He wears a mezuzah all the time on his body. So I learned about this. My parents called me, and my dad told me about what's going on, and then I went online and read a little bit more about it. And I commend there was a lot of information about them that was available online. So I commend, and there's a group of folks who are active here within, I think, the Iranian Jewish community that wrote about it, and so I was able to quickly learn. I walked over to Senator Hatch and said, this is something that's happening, and a couple of the folks are related to me, but regardless. And he, as a Mormon, has also been one that's been very active in defending religious minorities, so he quickly was able to identify. And he said, what should we do? And I said, well, let's write a letter to President Clinton and Secretary Albright that he was able to quickly get over. And he had a very good relationship generally with President Clinton. He was one of the folks who, during impeachment, tried to be helpful to him and made some positive comments, I think, at the chagrin of other Republican leaders. But so he called over and sent over the letter. President Clinton wrote a letter back by hand at the time and said that he would get on it, and he wanted to be sure that any action from the U.S. government wouldn't hurt them. But wanted to let them know that there are folks here who would be supportive of the 13. And so that's what we did. It wasn't a big deal. It was something that, whether it was 13 Jews or 13 Baha'is or 13 Mormons caught in China, we would probably do the same thing. And but it just happened to be a closer connection, and that was what the story behind there was.
Thank you very much. David, this question is for you. You mentioned about freeing the assets from Austria. People want to know, and more than one person, how could we do the same for the assets of the Iranian Jews that are in the Iranian government?
That's an interesting thing, and I would ask everyone to think of this. As a community, we often always look to the hardest part first when we need to look to the easiest part first. We can't bring an action today or anything. Iran, someday there'll be a day of reconciliation for all of Iran's children where we'll come back together. That day isn't there now. The reason we were able to do it with Austria is because some of its institutions wanted to play on the world stage. It wanted to join the European Union. What I could tell each person, though, the biggest problem we had, the tears that we had, I remember taking the statement of one Holocaust survivor and her telling the story of the assets that were stolen from her. And even if she got them back, she was too old. She wasn't going to get rich. She just wanted to have them come back. And she could describe the painting beautifully. She could describe where the assets were. She could describe everything. But she didn't have the hard data that we could use. And what was so frustrating to her is, as part of the agreement, the Austrian government said, we'll turn everything back, everything in that asset class. Trust me, the Austrians have a lot to do yet. They said, we'll turn everything back, and she couldn't get it back because she didn't know what it was. And so what I'd really ask each of you is, as people get older and as the torch is passed, please write down, please take affidavits from your family. Please take statements as to what assets your family has, what's there, because if we don't know what it is, no one's ever going to be able to claim it back. And we don't need to file a suit now. You don't need to give it to anyone now. If you can take just a document that describes things, have a notary public put it down, and you keep it yourself. I'm not saying give it to me. If you want me to give it to some people I know to hold it, that's fine. I'd say just keep it for yourself. Now, don't overdo it. One of the greatest tragedies I ever saw was the lead plaintiff in the Holocaust cases against Germany. Her parents, sort of on their deathbed, had made her memorize her Swiss bank accounts. And because she had memorized those Swiss bank accounts, she had been the lead plaintiff and was able to bring all the cases. And I remember at her funeral, all of us calling her a hero and seeing one of her aunts, and her aunt was devastated. Because her aunt said, no, she was a hero to you, but she ruined her life. Because all she did was look backwards and think back about those assets. So I'm not saying we shouldn't look back. I think we do need as a community to make a record of what was taken from us and what was lost, but to do it in a way that we don't give up today and tomorrow and our future. So, if anyone has more questions about it, I'm happy to talk about it later. But I would just say, even for his story, even if never a lawsuit is brought, it'd be good for your children and grandchildren and those who come later to know what you did and what you had back in Iran.
Thank you very much. As we are ending the time on the panel, I would like to start by asking Honorable Jimmy Delshad to give us a few comments as a closure and send us out there with a good advice.
Thank you very much again. It's really a pleasure to be here. I wanted to finish up by saying, no matter who you're going to vote for, register and vote. There is a big election coming up on November 4th, and you all have to make your voices known. Let's make sure that they know how the Persian community feels about any issue from any side you are. Of course, there is an issue on that ballot, has to do with this Hilton Hotel. It's called Proposition H, which I am very much in favor of. But get involved, vote. One of the reasons I was joking around when I became Beverly Hills mayor, they said, so what are you going to be known for? I said, you know, in Beverly Hills, there is street signs all over. It says BH, 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 right? I wanted the BH to be known as Baruch Hashem. So make your position known, go vote, and get other youngsters to vote. And Baruch Hashem and Bezrat Hashem will be in a lot better place next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you. Makan, go ahead. Makan, go ahead.
As good as that would be, thank God there's a constitution that would say that would be unconstitutional to do that, which is the exact same thing that'll probably protect us as religious minorities in this country. But I second that. You got to go out, register, and vote. Doesn't matter who it's for, but I think as that develops and more folks are voting, you build a block, and folks in Washington and in other places in Sacramento will listen. The other thing is just understand how the government works. So whether it's through this organization or others, learn how you might be able to write to a member of Congress to go to the State Department or to the Justice Department on a particular issue. So I think learning about the basic systems of the civic government is probably one of the most important things we could do as a community.
I just say, be aware of your own strength and of the fact that really one individual can change the world. And be aware that you guys will be writing not just our generation's history, but you'll also be writing your own generation's history, that you have that voice and you have all the tools, let's say, to tell a great, great, great story. And so that the personal decisions that you make, you should make with an eye on the immediate, but also what is the world going to say about us in 30 years? How, in what way would the world have missed us, this Iranian Jewish community, if we had never arrived here? What did we do here that was worth recording, that the rest of the world should know about?
Take it.
I would just say, please get involved in every way possible. Anything is possible. I had 5 different students intern for me and friends of mine when I was in Washington, D.C., and I had other people come to me and said, well, why'd you give so-and-so an internship and not my kid? And I said, he asked. And that's a constant theme for us. You know, register to vote, get involved. If you want to do internships, be it Sacramento here, there are people who know how to do this. Trust me, there's no charge, right? You can do it. If you want to get involved in the Obama campaign, talk to me. I'd like to talk you out of it, but I'll put you in touch with the right people, right? I will put you in touch with the right people. You want to get involved with the McCain campaign, I'll feel much better about myself doing it, but we'll do that as well. Whatever side you're on, just get involved. We've got a ton of people, and there are more ways than just voting, and money. Money in many ways is the least important. So also just keep a mind on that.
I would like to thank all of our panelists. It was a pleasure to be your moderator this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hakimi and our panelists for that wonderful discussion. We will now take a long-awaited 10-minute break. Please take your time to register to vote outside. We have voter registration forms outside. We will then continue with a very special video presentation and a panel discussion that will address our roles as advocates for Israel. Please be back at 2:50 promptly. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. We are about to begin. We ask that you please take your seats. Thank you.
Welcome back. Welcome back. The best way to make your dreams come true is to wake up. That was Muhammad Ali. Hi, I'm Robin Norman. I am a board member of 30 Years After. Before we hear from our next distinguished panel, I invite you to watch the first of 2 films that were created exclusively for 30 Years After by award-winning filmmaker David Sauvage and his staff. It was executively produced by Sam Yebri and myself. We appreciate David's work, particularly since his latest film, Carissa, has just qualified for Academy Award consideration. David is here today. Please go to carissaproject.com for more information. I hope you enjoy this short film, which depicts the contributions of some of the members of our community to the State of Israel. امیدوارم که لذت ببرین.
One of the first immigrants which coming down from the ship, and the question was what I'm doing here. I said I'm coming to Israel, State of Israel established, and I would like to be part of it.
I was very much inclined to go be in Israel and live in Israel, and partly because of my strong belief system that actually was the catalyst for me to leave my family and everybody and go to Israel, which was a wonderful, like a dream come true. I was like a happy camper.
I am Persian, yeah, but I don't have the feel I am Persian from Iran. I feel I'm born in Israel.
My family here maybe see me as a Persian soldier, but I see myself an Israeli soldier. It's not about heritage at all. It's just we're Jewish, we're Israeli, and we all serve in the army for Israel, for our country.
My name is Isaac Parviz Nazarian. I was in 1948 in Israel as a sergeant major.
Masoud, Meir, Michael, Naim. I served in the 1973 Yom Kippur War as a sergeant.
My name is Jacob Sharaf. I was in the war 1973 Yom Kippur in desert of Sinai.
My name is Mourad Khoubian. I just got out of the army. I served 2 years as a counselor in the artillery school.
The fact was, in that time, Israel entire under the pressure of war. 6 countries fighting in order not to let Israel establish the State of Israel.
We came out from the temple to go to the tank. The airplane from the Egypt put the bomb. Is exactly where is my friend. And they die after 3 minutes was the war start.
We were surrounded by Egyptian commandos to be taken over. And it was one of the wonderful things that happened. A small Israeli Navy unit went into the Egyptian harbor and did enough damage to delay their launching of the attack on our base.
If you're not going to the war, the other side, they're gonna kill you. You have to kill them to stop them.
I was proud of what I was doing. After thousands of years, we had a country. We were fighting for it.
For some people, it's really hard to lose yourself and be in the army. My cousins in Beverly Hills are going to the beach right now, and I'm in long uniforms with all of these things and a gun. What am I doing here?
Shalom.
Shalom. I've never talked to someone who was in the Milchemet Atzmut, in the war in 48. It was nice to hear he still remembers and how we appreciate us teenagers, youth, go to the army and serve for 2 or 3 years.
The military is a good school for young people. They are educating the soldiers, girls and boys, in order to be independent, to be decision makers. I'm right?
Yeah.
I think the idea of how it improves you and your perception of life, it should be a fringe benefit. What I learned is that at the end, yes, it does improve you, but the purpose of you wanting to go to the army should not be what it gives you, but should really what it gives to others, to the nation.
I felt like it was very meaningful years for me. I learned a lot, and I'm more connected to Israel, to my country now than ever.
Em eshkachech Yerushalayim, eshkach yemini.
Amen. If I won't forget Jerusalem, it's like my right side will be forgotten. Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure to meet you.
I am one of the very active in the Iranian Jewish community's activity in this country and in Israel.
I visit Israel every 2 years, sometime every year. My background is there.
It's still a place where morals are kept at high ground at a great cost. In that regard, I think it's a great nation.
I'm sure I'm gonna go back. If they need me someday for war again, I'm the first one going there to help them.
Like many, we are here and our hearts are in Israel, like always.
We would like to thank Moran Khubian, Michael Naim, Parviz Nazarian, and Jacob Sharaf. In defending the Jewish state, you have fought for our peace, security, and for our values, and for all our people and our progeny. Please rise and be recognized.
Hi, my name is David Duell, and I have the honor of serving on the board of 30 Years After. Today, we celebrate our commitment to Israel and explore ways in which we may expand our efforts to ensure its safety and prosperity. Although our community has experienced extraordinary success in a variety of fields, we have yet to translate our accomplishments into a significant political force. We hope that today can change that trend. It gives me great honor to introduce our distinguished panelist and guest. Rabbi Daniel Bouskila is a senior rabbi of Sephardic Temple Tiferet Israel. He has held his position since 1993, and at the age of 43, he is one of the youngest rabbis of any major congregation in the United States. Rabbi Bouskila served in the IDF Gefanti Infantry Brigade during the First Lebanon War and has since led 9 missions to Israel with high school students and synagogue members. Leah Soibel is a senior advisor of the Israel Project. Her passion for Israel has continued after her father, who was instrumental in the capture of Nazi war criminal Adolf Eichmann. An expert in cyber terrorism and Arab public diplomacy, Mrs. Soibel has traveled all over the Middle East and even put her life on the line to share Israel's story with the rest of the world. Consul Shahar Azani is the newly appointed consul for culture, media, and public affairs at the Israeli consulate. Consul Azani is a seasoned diplomat despite his age, having served as Israel's deputy ambassador to Kenya and as a deputy permanent representative to the United Nations. Our final panelist is David Suissa. Mr. Suissa is a CEO and founder of Suissa Miller Advertising. He's also the founder of Olam, a magazine on Jewish unity and spirituality. Our moderator for this panel is Tabby Davoodi. Ms. Davoodi recently finished her term as Director of Academic Affairs at the Israeli Consulate, where she was the official liaison between Israel and all institutions of higher education in the southwestern United States. But before we begin our panel, I would like to invite the Consul General of Israel, Jacob Dayan, to make a few special remarks. Consul General Dayan assumed his position in October 2007 and has maintained the close relationship that his predecessor, Ehud Danach, has cultivated with our community. He previously served as the Chief of Staff and Policy Advisor to Deputy Prime Minister Tzipi Livni. He's a wonderful asset to our community, and we thank him for being here tonight. Please welcome Consul General Jacob Dayan.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here. Ruz Becher. You see, you can see that already I have some months here in Los Angeles. But really, when the organizers came to me and asked me to speak in this wonderful event, the young Persian Jewish leadership, I immediately said yes. I had no doubts, because since I came here to Los Angeles, I was in touch with this amazing, wonderful community, this loving Zionist community that supports the state of Israel day and night. And I'm proud to be your friend, and I'm proud you'll be your partner, and I'm proud to cooperate with you in the future. Because together, and I really believe in that, together we can achieve great things, even from here, from Los Angeles, for the state of Israel. Now, you are commemorating 30 years later. But first and foremost, we have to mention that we are 60 years later, or as I say to everyone here, 3,060 years later. And we have to remember that. Because there is a story that we always have to bear in mind. You know that when Napoleon went to the Jewish quarter once, he saw all the Jews there crying and mourning. And he asked, why are all the Jews crying? So they told him, it's Tisha B'Av, it's 9th of Av. The temple was destroyed, so the Jews are crying. So he said, oh, when did it happen? They told him 1,700 years ago in Jerusalem. So he said, if the Jews are crying over something that happened 1,700 years ago in Jerusalem, they will be back in Jerusalem. And I think all of us here can be extremely, extremely proud of what the state of Israel has accomplished in 60 years. And the list is long, and I'm sure that those capable panelists that you have here, and those panelists are doing night and day, and they will tell you night and day for the state of Israel, and I know most of them very well. All of them can tell you what Israel has accomplished in the last 60 years. So we all have to bear in mind that, and we all have to tell the story of Israel beyond the conflict. The story of the Israelis that come every day in the morning and don't think how they can fight and don't think how can they defeat others, but they think what they can do for the world and how the world can be a better place because of them. You have more people working in high-techs on a daily basis, in agriculture on a daily basis, in other fields on a daily basis than people that go to the army. And this is a story that should be told day and night, because we have to tell the true story and the real story of the state of Israel. And last but not least, I think that what you should take here from this conference is the fact that you are not only enriched in information, and 30 years after you know what a huge threat Iran poses to the world, that 70 years after the Holocaust, and I'm a son of 2 Holocaust survivors. A leader speaks publicly about the annihilation of the state of Israel, about the destruction of the state of Israel. And in 9 days, he's going to visit New York. The UN visits there on behalf of free speech to freely speak about the destruction of the state of Israel. So what all of us should take from this conference today is how we can be proactive, what we can do in order to strengthen the state of Israel, and by that, strengthening the Jewish people. Because you can do a lot, when you are helping your neighbor, and when you are helping your community, and when you are running to politics, and when you are representing the state of Israel, as some I know here in the public, representing the state of Israel in the campuses, at the universities, you are helping a lot to the state of Israel. And the first step, I want to invite you all, we have a march of solidarity to the state of Israel, supporting the state of Israel. Exactly 1 day before Rosh Hashanah, on September 28th, we are going to raise the Israeli flag for the first time ever in Los Angeles, having soldiers from Israel, soldiers from Iraq, the National Guard, all the kids from all the schools, and I expect to see all the Jewish Persian community coming and supporting and showing solidarity to the State of Israel. Because together, and only together, as a unified force, Israel will be much stronger and Israel will reach much further. So thank you for your support and be proactive. Thank you.
Shalom. Now, I know that our distinguished panel is not here on a Sunday on stage with us for such a lousy shalom, so we're going to try that again. Shalom! You see, I work on your behalf. As my friend David mentioned, my name is Tabby Davoodi, and I have the honor of not only serving on the 30 Years After board, but of also moderating our panel today. And you have to give me a minute because I'm a little bit emotional because I can't believe that this day is actually here. I want to show you something, and that is my badge that I wore today, because it says 30 years after board member, and it's not a responsibility that I take lightly. And I want you to know how incredibly proud I am, that I get to be a part of this organization at this moment in time. And just in case you thought that, I was always involved, that maybe perhaps some of you wouldn't be up to the task, I want you to know it wasn't that way. I wasn't always involved. I came to a few Persian synagogues every now and then. I was very involved for Israel, but not as involved as I should have been in my own community. 30 years after gets my time, it gets my commitment, because I believe in 30 years after. And I'll tell you something else I believe. I also believe that, and I always did, that there's a lot more to my generation here than lavish weddings and fabulous hair. And 30 years after gets that. So that's just a little personal something that I wanted to express with you today. And for that, I would love it if we could not only give 30 years after, but all of the volunteers, all of my friends sitting here in this room, a great big round of applause. So I want you to know that I've been personally influenced by the work of each one of our distinguished panelists. And of course, the Consul General who had to leave, he's making an appearance on the Chabad telethon later. And specifically, I just want to take a few seconds and address each one of you, beginning with Rabbi Bouskila. Rabbi Bouskila, we worked closely together when I was at the consulate. The State of Israel has no better friend than you, and I really mean that. And and you're a champion of the students, you're a champion of the community, and I believe you're a blessing for the Los Angeles community, and I wholeheartedly congratulate you on your 15-year anniversary at Sephardic Temple. And then we have David Suissa. David, I haven't had the pleasure to hear you in person, but when someone heard that you were coming to speak, he bought a ticket on the spot to come and hear you speak as part of this panel, because he said how great you have been in the past. And, every Friday when the journal comes out, I come and I pick it up and I look for your column. I really feel that you have your hand on the pulse of this community here. And for that, I'm really grateful. So thank you for being here. And Leah, your work is incredible. And not only that, but for those of you who are not familiar with the Israel Project based in Jerusalem, where Leah's joining us from, and Washington, D.C., is an amazing organization, and it produces very important literature on Israel. And what does it do with this literature? The literature is distributed to journalists and policymakers with the facts about Israel, because we all know that if it wasn't, there are plenty of people on the other side who are more than happy to offer the facts and mistruths. And specifically, I encourage all of you, if you haven't already, to also look up the literature that the Israel Project conducts in how the public perceives Israel outside of us, outside of our community. And I have to tell you, and you can tell them back in Jerusalem, Leah, how much the study Israel 2020 affected us and me specifically. Israel 2020 was an in-depth, bless you, survey of how college students, average college students, not Jews, will come to view Israel by the year 2020. So Leah, thank you for your work. Thank you for the Israel Project. And finally, it is my great pleasure to introduce you to Consul Shahar Azani. And I love that I get to make your debut here, Shahar. Shahar Azani recently took over for Consul for Media and Public Affairs Gilad Milo, whom I know many of you worked with closely in this room. And I had the pleasure of working with Shahar for exactly 1 day during my last day at the consulate. And I know it's something we both mourn, but you bring so much energy, Shahar, to this community. They're going to fall in love with you on the campuses, just like any other diplomats we've taken to the campuses. And if any of you are wondering, Consul Azani, despite his tall, dark, and handsome features, is not Iranian. He's actually Yemenite Israeli. So thank you for being here. So I wanted to get straight to the first question, if that's even possible at this point. As the Consul General said, this year we're celebrating 60 years of independence for the State of Israel. And I want us to take a minute, though, and reflect that within these 60 years of independence for Israel, they've been marked by 30 years. The last 30 years of this has been marked by what some would refer to as a dark period in Iran. Now, the vast majority of this audience lives and thrives here in the United States as a result of immigration from Iran during the revolution, and in the case of me and my family, during the Iran-Iraq war. And true to the diaspora Jewish spirit, we're scattered around the world, most notably a lot of families still in Iran, a lot of family, as you saw in our wonderful video, in Israel. Our audience members tonight have cousins, friends, brothers and sisters serving in the IDF. And of course, we have our wonderful community here in the States. Last week, the Jewish Journal of Greater Los Angeles published as its cover story an in-depth look into where the Iranian American Jewish community is 30 years after the revolution. And it estimated that today, there are somewhere between 40,000 to 45,000 Iranian Jews living in Southern California and 10,000 to 15,000 living in New York. Now, our community here is deeply Zionistic and extremely educated, having some of the highest, if not the highest, education levels among any immigrant communities to the United States. And specifically, I want to refer you to the case of one Iranian Jew who was born in 1948 in Tehran, who in a few days will run as chair of his Kadima party and may one day lead the State of Israel, and his name is Shaul Mafaz. So for our panelists, I have the following question, and if I may, I'd like to start with you, David. Recognizing that we are what I would call the triple hyphen generation, Iranian, American, Jew. What distinct potential do you think our community can bring with it in advocating for Israel? What gifts do we have? And I want you to be tough on us, all of you, what is there that we could be doing a bit more in terms of Israel advocacy in the community, in the states, around the world. So I'd like to first hear specifically, where are the potential, what is the Iranian Jewish community in the US doing right for Israel, and what is there more room for us to be doing?
I think a good analogy is family. And when you raise your children, it's not a project, it's a lifestyle. It's part of your life, it's 24/7. And Israel is family. Israel is more than a cause or a project or an assignment or an opportunity to go to a flag raising or so forth. Israel is a lifestyle. And when you look at it that way, everything that happens in your life could be an opportunity to give something back to Israel. And I mean a lot more than money. Often when people give money, it becomes a substitute for something else that could be more valuable. Let me give you a couple of examples. Next time you have a bar mitzvah or a wedding or a simcha, there is a way to incorporate Israel in your simchas. And especially the Persian people. I've been living here for 25 years, and I remember very well in 2001 the way you all rose up. And I was there with you, and there were so many speeches made, and so much happened. I was just amazed at how you all stood up for Israel, and you still do to this day. So my contribution to this is to make Israel advocacy a lifestyle. And like the Consul General said earlier, I think we've been on the defensive for too long. And Israel is important to the world, which is a lot more than Israel is important to the Jews. And I think our enemies have made us look like we are bad for the world. And the truth is the exact opposite.
Thank you.
I think the most important component of advocacy, whether it's with regard to a community as strong and as amazing as yours, this is my first pleasure to be in Los Angeles, and I'm from the outset, you are really an amazing community of Iranian Jewish Americans, and I'm proud to be here. And what I can tell you from being an Argentinian and coming from the Latin American community as well as an Israeli, is that we need to focus on producing one message. There's a lot of different words about Israel, there's a lot of different images about Israel, and most importantly, when communicating Israel to others, either within our community or outside of our community, with its regard to Iran, with regard to the United States. Israel's a global brand, and we need to focus on communicating the same issues and the same messages about Israel, because the more messages there are, the more we offset what is the real Israel and what is the real message we want to get across to others with regard to Israel. And particularly right now, I know we're looking 30 years ahead, but we need to look at right now, because with the technology that's available to us and the threats that are so real that exist before us right now, we need to be outspoken yourselves as a community with the one voice that you do have, and the representation that you have being Persian Jews is the threat of Iran. And I know we've discussed this several times this evening, but I need to stress it again, because more than often you'd be surprised how many people outside of your community and outside of Israel don't realize how grave the threat really is, not just only to Israel, but to the entire world. And the message really is that there are peaceful solutions to stop Iran. And if we don't use the solutions available to us right now, 30 years from now, we can't be sure whether there'll be solutions to prevent anything more dangerous and more ugly than what we already can perceive occurring 30 years from now, if we can stop a reality that we don't want to happen to occur.
Thank you, Leah. Thank you. Rabbi Bouskila.
Timing in life is everything. I also grew up a triple or quadruple hyphenated Moroccan, American, Israeli Jew. And it produces naturally schizophrenia amongst us. We never know where we're from and who we are and what language we're dreaming in and how we should communicate. That was my way of life. I'm born and raised in the United States. And when I came to my Jewish private school here in Los Angeles when I was 5 years old, I only spoke French, and it's still my communicative language with my parents, with my sisters. So we all share this journey that we've been transplanted from one place to another. And one of the bonds, the hyphens along the way, is Jew and Israel. And if the question that's raised to us here is what specifically the Persian Jewish community can do better, I'm going to echo what was just said here in a very distinguished way by my colleague on the panel, Leah, but I want to make it a little bit more poignant. I know that it was very, very difficult for many Iranians who came from Iran and lived a beautiful life there, and suddenly there was upheaval and you had to leave. It's very difficult to accept that the place that you once upon a time called home is no longer a welcoming place to you. It's very difficult to accept that there is today a leader of that very same place that you once upon a time grew up and went bike riding and played soccer and were an open Jew and enjoyed your life, threatening to wipe the Jewish state off the map and holding Holocaust conferences. And I think what the Iranian Jewish community is positioned to do today in terms of advocacy is to speak in one clear and loud voice that despite the fact that once upon a time it was home to you, we can't waffle and say, like I've heard some in the Iranian community when I've had speakers in my own synagogue. We've had speakers from Israel, distinguished speakers, who have come and spoken about the potential options that are on the table for Israel, including potentially taking out Iran's nuclear reactor. This is an existential threat. It is a reality. It was discussed for 45 minutes this morning on CNN in a panel just like this. And there are still some who will raise their hands and say, Pakistan has the bomb. Why wouldn't you bomb Pakistan? Why are you pointing your fingers at Iran? We have to speak in one loud, clear voice and make it clear to the world that yes, once upon a time this was home, but it's no longer home. It's home here. I'm a Moroccan Jew. I've never been to Morocco, and I would not advocate anything. I would never walk around with the flag of Morocco today. It's where my father was born. It's my customs when I make Kiddush, but it's not my homeland. We have two homes. We live here beautifully in the United States, and we have only one small place that we call home for the Jewish people called Israel, and anything that's going to threaten that country, including the place where I once upon a time called home, must be handled on a diplomatic level and even on a military level if necessary. And so I think you can do a great job, better than I can because I didn't come from Iran. You could do the best job having come from there, knowing really the mentality, as opposed to certain diplomats who think, we're going to sit and talk and everything's going to be okay. You know the truth. The older generation who was born there, or even the people in their 30s or 40s who may have experienced some of that mentality, you understand it. And you could speak better than any of us about the threat, the existential and real threat, and make sure that you're advocates for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Bouskila.
Well, before I relate specifically and directly to the issue, please allow me to thank you 30 years after, and for truly, Tabby, making this debut for me, because I've now been here for a whole 1 month. And it's a great pleasure for me to be welcomed by such a huge and loving community. So thank you very much.
We're so happy to have you here.
Especially for me as an Israeli diplomat, you can imagine some fora for us are more difficult than others. So this is practically basking in a bubble bath. I have to tell you that coming here, I wasn't entirely sure I was off to a great start because, Tabby had to work with me for a day before she escaped. But she left a great inheritance for me, Donna Benji, another member of this community who is in the hall. Donna, Director of Academic. Here she is, our new Director for Academic Affairs at the Consulate, who is helping me. Coming here, I had no idea that one of the official languages of Southern California would be Farsi. But I thought I might be off to a good start having known Arabic for a little, just a little bit. Relating to the issue itself of advocacy and going back to Tabby's last day at the consulate, she left me a T-shirt saying, "We are waiting to welcome you at UC Irvine." Israel is facing many challenges as far as its mere existence. And the question relating to the triple identity, Iran, Jewish, the United States. This is a humongous opportunity, because when you think about Israel, the Jewish state, when you think of yourselves as Jews living in the United States, which is Israel's major ally, fighting Iran, which is perceived to be an existential threat to the state of Israel, not only as a state vis-a-vis the relations between Israel and Iran, but also Iran's negative influence in the region. Iran has been playing a very negative role as far as enhancing the extremist forces in the Middle East in bringing about what is hoped by them to be the annihilation of the state of Israel. Coming from Nairobi and working with the UN there is a major UN headquarters in Nairobi. I was asked many a time by colleagues, diplomats, by media, why are you so much up and about as far as Iran is concerned? As Rabbi Bouskila mentioned before, other nations hold nuclear weapons as well. So why make an issue out of Iran? And don't they have a right if you have, and I shall stop there? My reply to this was, let us use one of Israel's major Hasbara assets for our policies, President Ahmadinejad. When he said in October 2005, we want to wipe Israel off the map. That's number one. Number two, he says, we are aspiring to have nuclear technology. Now, am I being foolish by putting one and one together? And all we need to do is think through this challenge. And for you, the Persian community, not only as a whole, not only for the younger generation, who was able, by the way, to set such an impressive venue today, to use your knowledge of Iran to better understand the dangers that we are facing and to better engage the world with realizing the danger that Israel and the world is facing from such a dangerous enemy. Thank you.
Thank you, Shahar. Thank you. So I want to raise an issue now that's, many of you who know me here, is very, very close to my heart. I don't know if those of you who know, and especially among our parents, but among us here today, and I'm proud to say they're Iranian American Jews, are some of the best campus pro-Israel advocates I have ever had the pleasure to know. From representatives today from Bruins for Israel at UCLA, go Bruins, to Anteaters for Israel at UC Irvine, I feel for you. They are the leadership of pro-Israel efforts on campuses, and I think we should really be proud of that. So before I get into my question, I just have one question for the audience, not for the panel. Would you please raise your hands, our audience members, if you yourselves have ever witnessed or heard of an anti-Zionist activity, whether it was verbal or written, from a professor or from a hostile campus group, maybe during a Palestinian Awareness Week? Would you please raise your hands? As you can see, the majority of our audience here has witnessed such. So my question for our panel is, what are some of your reflections about the situation that Israel faces on campus here in the States? Rabbi Bouskila, you're a hop, skip, and a jump from UCLA. You serve on the Hillel board. You work with the Center for Jewish Studies. Leah, you know through your research, you know through working with the Israel Project what we're up against, and some of the messages, the really disgusting messages that I think you find in what you research, we find on campuses. And David, you're a great advocate. I've heard people hear you say that you've spoken on campuses and gotten people very excited. And Shahar, academic affairs is going to be a huge part of the consulate's public diplomacy campaign. So I would love to hear your thoughts about what we're facing on campus and, you know, what remedies you think exist for us without resorting to the tactics of the other side. So I guess we can begin with Rabbi Bouskila.
Once again, timing is everything. If we were college students during the late 60s, early 70s. There's a story in the Bible which I think is the story of what happened to Israel on college campuses. It's called David and Goliath. Once upon a time, David was the state of Israel. Israel was perceived as the underdog, as David, as the persecuted nation that came out of the shadows of the Holocaust and rose to prominence and was struggling for its life and defending itself. At a certain point, the tone on college campuses changed and Israel became Goliath. I was a student at UCLA in the late 1980s when I came back from Israel after serving in the army, and it was just at the time when the first Intifada broke out. This also was timed with the rise of cable TV, CNN, and the images of Israel on television looked less than favorable. As a result, the college campus became a very hostile place. When we stood on Bruin Walk when I was a student and we would put out an Israeli flag, I felt like we were putting out a swastika. People would come by, spit, give us all sorts of profanities and arguments, and they were convinced that Israel was now Goliath, Israel was the Nazi regime, and this has only gotten worse and worse. It hasn't gotten better. The media, with very few exceptions, is not a friend of Israel today, and neither is the college campus. I think what we need to emphasize, what are college campuses all about? They are bastions of professors who want to speak about human rights, international rights, women's rights, the rights of minorities. What every single college student needs to do is to check the human rights and all the, quote, rights list in the Arab countries and in the territories in Israel that surround Israel and within Israel, and even in many Arab cities within the state of Israel, and how they treat their own populations, and compare that to a country which is more critical of itself than any country you'll find anywhere. I once, when I was a student in New York, took a cab ride home with a Palestinian who was studying journalism at Columbia University. He was an Israeli Arab, actually, not from the West Bank or Gaza. We spoke Hebrew together, and he said, you know, Israel is a good place. Israel is a very, very good place for me, for my purposes, for my profession, because it's the only place in the world where I, as an Arab journalist, can critique the government and not be afraid for my life. And I think that message has to be made clear, that we're dealing with countries that are not democracies, that don't believe in human rights, that treat women as second-class citizens and chattel. This has to be emphasized when professors want to capture one picture on the cover of the New York Times and turn that into anti-Israel bashing. So more of what they believe in, and emphasize that that's what really Israel is all about compared to their surroundings in the region.
Thank you. Shahar?
When we look at Israel's position in the academies, and I have to say that obviously the problem is very well known in the United States, but even, by the way, in academies elsewhere. And I've encountered the same kind of questions coming from universities and leading ones in East Africa where I served. I remember going for a talk at the Faculty of Social Sciences in one of these leading universities, and that was meant for lecturers. And it was in the height of the 2006 Lebanon Hezbollah war with Israel. And I don't know when exactly it became fashionable or bon ton to criticize Israel in the academies. If you want to be considered as a scholar or as a proper individual to serve in an academy, bash Israel. Say something bad about Israel, because Israel is the ultimate evil. And it seems that Israel becoming part of the mainstream in world politics has turned it into some sort of a Goliath, in Rabbi Bouskila's words, or a holy cow to be slaughtered in the sacred hall of the academies. Now, I have to say that one of the questions that the lecturers asked me, there was one specifically vicious, who said, I have two things to tell you. One, Israel and the Jews are a wonderful example of how the tail wags the dog, as Hollywood said once, vis-a-vis American policies in the Middle East. Your command of the United States of America is quite staggering. That was number one. Number two, he said, your control of world finances is spectacular. So I told him number 3 would be that some of your best friends are Jewish. But the level of hostility reached in universities is dangerous, and it must be fought, and with 2 main weapons on the individual level. One is be informed, know what you're talking about. Because the problem is when somebody approaches you and says, yes, you're Jewish, but how can you support those soldiers killing a pregnant woman in an ambulance in that checkpoint? Didn't you see that on the news? Well, maybe there was something, maybe there wasn't, maybe there was something which was remotely described or misdescribed as such an incident. Know what you're talking about, and don't be hesitant to say what you think. Express what you feel. Don't be shy and don't be quiet in the face of such shall I use Semitism? Okay, if I change Israel Jewish, anti-Semitism, yes, because some people say Israel controls the US, Israel controls world finances, Israel must be destroyed, change Israel to Jews, and there you have 1939 again. Thank you.
You know, just to add a little light touch to this, I have to say that I always prefer reading anti-Semitic papers. Makes me feel good. When I read Jewish publications, we're always disappearing, we're threatened, we're going to disappear in a few years. When I read anti-Semitic publications, we control the banks, the finances, the whole world. Makes me feel a lot better. Anyway.
David.
I think to a certain extent we have to ignore the opposition on campus because they want us to get into an argument with them. That's what they love. And it's very hard to win certain arguments. And I know because I've been there. And what's happened is that the value of Israel has been diminished. And what I would love to see happen is somehow find a way to increase the value of Israel, the perceived value of Israel on U.S. campuses. There is no country in the world like Israel. I'd like to see an unapologetic, proud, positive campaign that shows what Israel gives to the world. And if you want to boycott Israel, well then don't use your cell phone, as one example. And I think instead of sort of going down to their level and trying to get into a contest of who's right and who's wrong, those things are very hard to win. So that's my contribution to the campus, if we can create this really strong, unapologetic statement that the world needs Israel and that Israel is making some incredible contributions to the world. The vision that the world has of Israel right now is that we're very, very good with defense. We have a great army, and we're very strong with defense. And that's created this real misperception of the value of Israel to the world. And there are some scientific contributions in the area of cancer research, Parkinson's disease. Imagine Israel Green Day on campus, where the students who are all obsessed with the environment right now would see the incredible contributions. There is no country in the world right now that is making more contribution in the area of green technology on a per capita basis than Israel. Just imagine if you had Israel Green Day on campus. And all these kids that are, want to drive Priuses, whatever you call it, and, that are obsessed with green, they would see how Israel is on the cutting edge of all the important issues in the world. Whether it's going into a place that's got a tsunami, an earthquake disaster, hunger in Africa. There are a million amazing things about Israel that the world has no clue.
I agree very much with what my colleagues say, and to expand on that, I don't think we should always focus our attention on what's going on the campuses, because we all know, those that have been there, those of us that have studied there, those of you that have children on those campuses, you know how bad it is. And what I particularly do, and what my organization does, I think is a good solution, is that we look at where's the origin, what's the starting point of that? How does that information get to those people that hate Israel so much and can collectively get together and put on their protests and give Israel that negative image that we also work so hard, either individually or collectively, to improve. And what is the source of that problem? It's information. And the source of that problem is the international media. And it's not about getting to the problem after the fact, after it's generated and has become so bad on our campuses that our kids don't want to study because they feel that they're so threatened within their own society, which is where we're headed. But it's, how can I stop that negative information from even being printed? How can I stop those people that hate Israel and that want Israel to suffer or be removed from this earth, to have the foreign press print something so negative? One headline, mind you, one headline that's so negative can deter an entire public opinion. An entire public, I'm talking hundreds of thousands of people. They see one negative headline, and we can't undo that. It doesn't matter if we have 20 Shahars out there and the best spokesman in the world. It takes a lot of energy and strength to undo that. So really, the goal here is not to wait till after it's happened, not to wait till it's too late and we can't undo a problem that is perpetuated by some powers we don't have control over. But it's to stop the negative information before it reaches the press, to the headlines, and to the hands and into the minds of those that do not like us and want to continue not liking us.
Thank you, Leah. Shahar wanted.
Just a quick one. Thank you, Leah. I think in this hall we have the potential to have hundreds of shachars, which is spectacular. It's a wonderful thing. Secondly, just to give you an example, carrying on from what David mentioned, as I was working in the UN as part of the Israeli delegation, and the UN in Nairobi handles professional issues, UN professional, environment, human settling and dwelling, and at one point we came to the UN and said, hey, you know what? Forget politics for a minute. What can Israel do with the UN together as part of your professional agenda to promote what we can promote as far as our technological abilities, water, green technology? How can we be of assistance? We signed 2 memorandums of understanding. We've incorporated Israeli know-how in the UN's agenda to work not in the Middle East, but in African countries. We've been able to bring hundreds of UN projects and project managers and teams to Israel for training. And that's the way forward, because from there, when we had a meeting a few months later talking about the denunciation of Israel due to this or that, we had many more partners on board who wouldn't denounce Israel for its activities.
With your permission, I'm going to move straight ahead, even though I had 3 or 4 questions of my own, to some very good audience questions that we have for you. And I thank you again for being on our panel, and I thank everyone in the audience as well for their passion. We've had one question for all of you, and I think it's a perfect question for each and every one of you here, which is the topic that we've been discussing a lot. It seems like the media is coming up, more and more. If those of us in the audience today are looking for distinct, on-the-ground measures that we can do to advocate for Israel, can you please shed some light on us on what new technologies we can use, the role of the new global media, where if a student here at USC writes an op-ed on their campus paper, someone can look it up on the internet in the Middle East and maybe be inspired by it, maybe have their minds changed about it. So this is a big issue, and I want to bring this up in 2008. What tools are at our disposal, specifically within the media, on the internet, and so on? How can one person in this room make that type of difference using these tools? So whoever would like to begin.
I suggest there's a lot of different things that each one of you as individual advocates can do to help Israel on the ground. But my suggestion is to make it strategic. There's only so much one person can do with regard to Israel's image and protecting Israel with regard to information and the media. And every approach, whether it's an op-ed on a particular topic or it's circulating positive images with regard to Israel when there's a lot of negative ones out there that are being used by the news agencies that get into hundreds of thousands of papers around the world. Be strategic and be very selective as to what your capabilities are and what are your resources. Decide from that point on how you can best serve Israel by targeting a certain audience and targeting a certain paper and that one with which you can probably carry the most leverage and get the most done.
Well, you know, the world today has changed. You can become your own magazine, your own television station, your own paper, so your own blog. So I encourage you to just start your own thing. And like she said, have a strategy. And if the strategy is what Israel's value is to the world, there are hundreds of things that you can contribute. If you like making films, make a film on contributions to the world from Israel, upload it on YouTube, have a blog, and get on Israel 21C if you want information on Israel's contributions to the world. Israel21c.com. And each one of you is a television station and a magazine and a publishing company in the new media world that we're in today. And obviously that includes the social networks, you know, whether it's MySpace or Facebook and all the things that you all know about. So, but stay on strategy and develop your own little talent to show the value of Israel to the world.
Just adding briefly to what was just said here, I mean, stating the obvious, we're in a high-tech, fast-paced world where we could all create our own images. But the question is, what images? Not everybody who goes to college is into debating politics, whether it's about Israel or the United States. We're not all politicians or aspiring politicians or political scientists. And Israel is not all about who will win the next election and who's the best soldier in the IDF. There is a lot more to Israel, and David spoke about it, the technology, the cell phones, the cancer research. There's also an incredible culture of literature, of art, of music, of sports. That image of Israel must be on your blogs, on your Facebook pages. If you want to hold an Israel fair, don't just bring speakers to campus who are going to debate the professor who's anti-Israel. Perhaps try to bring, through the good offices of the Israeli consulate, try to bring one of the stars of Maccabi Tel Aviv, Israel's basketball team, and show a completely different face of Israel, because it's not only about the Arab-Israeli conflict.
And we don't have to just be a victim, Daniel.
Exactly.
You know, I know it's
We've
so
done
tempting.
a lot of things.
It's so tempting to talk about Iran and the existential crisis. They're going to blow us out. They're going to, you know, throw us into the sea, like they say, or wipe us off the map. But the truth is, there's nothing we can really do about that. There are a lot of very important people that are working on that. The news is being spread. What we can do as individuals is spread the value of Israel. And Israel is a lot more than a victim in trouble. That's right. And I think the world has had it as far as hearing us complain that Israel is in trouble. We all know Israel is in trouble existentially, and people are taking care of that. What we can do is give this positive statement to the world that we are a lot more than a victim who's worried.
Thank you. Shahar, did you want to put up?
Well, actually, Consul Bouskila has said everything for us, but just to end it with, we are the consulate there for you. If you have a good idea, approach us. We'll do what we can to assist you. And yes, we do think that when we talk about the ramifications of Israel's existential threats, we need to think, what would that kind of saying do to an investor who wants to come to Israel and invest? He's an Israel supporter, but will he think twice if we talk about Iran one time too many? And the second thing, culture, absolutely. That's why my title says Council for Culture, Media and Public Affairs, because culture is a wonderful tool. We brought a play to Nairobi called House Husband, about a pilot who retired, and he's giving hell to his wife now that he's living in pension, and he wants to go with her to classes, he wants to join her for the swimming pool, he wants to take the kids out, and he's giving her a hard time. We brought one of the harshest Israel critics to see that play, and we received one of the most beautiful op-eds the following Monday, saying the beautiful side of Israel, because there aren't only tanks but also people there. Remember.
If I can make a practical suggestion to all those who are in college, the next time Idan Reichel is in town, bring friends. It's greater representation from Israel, with no due disrespect, than many of the politicians who come to town and speak for Israel. It's a lot more inspirational, and it's a completely different face of Israel, and an important one.
Thank you very much. Shahar, did you have?
No, we're done.
We're done? Okay. So unfortunately, it seems we've run out of time for audience questions, but our wonderful panel will be here for the most part afterwards to continue to speak with you and answer your questions. I want to truly thank you from the bottom of my heart, all of you, for being here, and for all of our participants and our audience members today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Before we proceed with our scheduled program, we have a special message from LA Council Member Bill Rosendahl.
Thank you. Shalom and shalom, first of all. Second of all, you see the yarmulke? God is above us. I wear a blue one because blue means hope. And those of you who have ever seen my show, you know the way I did that show when I wanted fairness and integrity and honesty. And I must say, from many of my levels in life, from a businessman and from a politician, the Persians who have come here to make a difference have made a huge difference in the economy and in the political process. And I just want to say, bless you all, and thank you for being who you are. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Bill Rosendahl, for those kind words. I also want to thank Ms. Tabby Davoodi and the panelists for the discussion. And before we adjourn for our quick 10-minute break, before our last panel, I would like to inform you that in the International Terrace, we'll be serving refreshments, tea, coffee, and snacks. And I'd like to remind our guests that in the Beverly Hills Ballroom series, we have an exhibition, as well as a photographic exhibition called Preview of Becoming Persian by renowned photojournalist Shelley Gazin. Thank you.
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, there's a brief 10-minute break out in the foyer. We ask you to please return to your seats within 10 minutes so we can have for the final panel. Thank you.